Good afternoon, everyone, and good evening to those of you who are joining us from a different time zone. Welcome to Avpn and SFI's session on demystifying gender lens investing. I'm Komal Sahu, Chief of Sustainable Finance at Avpn, and I'm your moderator for this session and delighted to have you join us today. In today's sessions, we will explore gender lens investment landscape in Asia and have a candid discussion with practitioners who apply a gender lens. A few housekeeping announcements before we move on to the program. If you have any questions for your speakers in relation to the session, we will have a 25-minute Q&A at the end, so stay with us till the end. Feel free to type up your questions in the Q&A pod, and we'll try and get these questions to our speakers. Due to time constraints, the speakers are not going to be able to address all of your questions. Please note, this session will be recorded and you will be able to access the recording after the session on our website. To get us started, I would like to call upon my colleague, Roshini Prakash, Director of Knowledge at Avpn, to present an overview of gender lens investing landscape. Roshini, over to you.
Thanks, Komal. A pleasure to be here and glad to have everybody with us today. Today, I'd like to talk to you a little bit about the trends that we see in gender lens investing in the Asia-Pacific region. But before I get started, maybe I can tell you a little bit about Avpn first. Avpn, for those who don't know us, is a network of funders and resource providers with over 600 members across 32 markets. The majority of our membership is based in this region, but about 20% of them sit outside the region and invest into it. Our mission at Avpn is to move more capital towards impact in Asia by providing social investors opportunities to connect with key stakeholders across various sectors and markets, to learn from one another, and to find opportunities for action. I lead the Knowledge and Insights team within the products pillar at Avpn, and my role with the team is to support our members with research and best practice on a range of social investment topics and themes. And in that respect, I'm here today to share with you what we know about gender lens investing. So what is gender lens investing? Gender lens investing, as the name suggests, is investing with the intent to address gender issues or to promote gender equity in many ways, including by investing in women-owned or led enterprises, investing in enterprises that promote workplace equity, be it in staffing, management, boardroom representation, or even along their supply chains, or investing in enterprises that offer products and services that improve the lives of women and girls. Now, the global market for impact investing globally was estimated in 2020 to be about 715 billion US dollars. More than half of the impact investors who add to that total invest in gender equality. This is one of the top 6 target impact areas for these impact investors, and mostly in emerging markets. Now, we've seen increasing momentum in GLI as a strategy over the last few years. In Asia in particular, we've seen quite a lot of growth since about 2018. Asia is now the second largest market in the world for GLI. Private market investment vehicles have led the growth of this approach in the region, and capital raised by private market investment vehicles has increased about 350% from 2018 to 2019. Globally, across public and private markets, there are a total of at least 192 named and active gender lens investment vehicles, with a total AUM of about 7.7 billion US dollars. It may seem small, but the year-on-year increase has been significant. And between 2018 and 2019, the growth was about 61%. You may be asking, why is this important? Why are people starting to pay so much attention to investing in women? I think that the evidence speaks for itself. Across the world, countries are losing money every day, significant sums of money every day because of differences in lifetime earnings between men and women. There are persistent disparities in employment opportunities and wages offered to different genders. And these are holding global GDP back by about 26% from what it could be, looking at the projections to 2025. In addition, the female economy represents a market that may surprise you. It's more than twice the size of India and China combined. By 2028, female consumers will control about 15 trillion USD of global consumer spending. And yet, nearly 40% of women and girls around the world still live in countries that are failing on gender equality. So this is a tremendous lost opportunity. And the numbers here that I've presented are actually pre-pandemic numbers. If you think about the impact of COVID-19 and the recovery from COVID-19, neglecting the interests and perspectives of women and girls will only be to our detriment as economies try to rebuild and recover. If women drop out or can't re-enter the workforce, we will lose a tremendous amount of labor, and we will not be able to rebuild the sectors that have suffered most from this crisis, sectors like tourism, hospitality, the service industry. For these sectors to be rebuilt to be less vulnerable to the kind of instability we are seeing now, we need to be thinking about what the workers and the employees need. And since a disproportionate number of the employees are women, we've got to be thinking about what will bring women back to the workforce. Things like domestic care, people who can help women at home take care of their children or their elderly parents, that will allow them to contribute effectively and efficiently in their jobs. Also, studies have shown that women-led businesses perform better with less investment than male-led businesses. And that's partly because women entrepreneurs have often faced structural inequities and have had to identify ways to be successful without the resources available to other more privileged groups. So if we are unable to invest in women-led businesses, we won't be building back better. The third point I wanted to highlight is actually that women are continuing to be the most important to us in terms of purchasing and consumption of essential goods and services. They make or influence 70 to 80% of purchases worldwide. And as essential goods will constitute the bulk of spending by families as we recover from the pandemic, neglecting the interests and the perspective of women will be to our detriment. So that is really the social and economic case for why investing in women is important. Now this year, world leaders will meet at the G7 summit for the first time since the pandemic. This is the first time since 2018, actually. At the 2018 convening, these world leaders had launched a challenge called the 2X Challenge. At the time, pre-pandemic, it was seen as a major commitment of the development finance institutions from these countries to unlock resources to help advance women's economic empowerment and gender equality. The goal at that time was to raise USD $3 billion in commitments. In that time, they have managed to amass 1.5 times the amount. And as they meet again this June and talk about the recovery from the pandemic and what will be needed for economies to recover, it's clear that promoting the needs of women will also be on the agenda. And that means providing women in developing countries with access to leadership opportunities, quality employment, finance, enterprise support, as well as products and services that enhance their inclusion and economic participation. So far, I've shared the social case, economic case, the global policy imperative, and what about the business case? Now, the evidence here is indisputable too. According to research by the International Finance Corporation and others from 2017 onwards, gender balanced and gender diverse teams have outperformed in terms of returns on equity, share price, performance, and growth. The most recent report by IFC, Oliver Wyman, and Rock Creek in 2019 drew on gender diversity and performance data from more than 700 funds and 500 portfolio companies. And this research showed that PE and VC funds in emerging markets with gender-balanced senior investment teams actually generate 10 to 20% higher returns compared with funds that have a majority of male or indeed female leaders. Portfolio companies, this research showed, that had a gender-balanced leadership team outperformed in valuation by as much as 25% compared to non-diverse teams. So having said all that, what is the role of investors? The role of investors is actually multifarious. The key point here is to consider the gender implications of all the work that you can do as an investor and how you can bring to light your interest and the priority that you place on gender equality and women's economic empowerment in different ways. For instance, if you're investing in listed funds and firms, choose those that perform well in gender equity so that you drive capital to the better actors. If you are seeding new vehicles, choose to fund those that address issues that disproportionately affect women as leaders or innovators, workers, customers, wherever in the supply and leadership chain they are. If you work with funds and investment managers, require them to address gender dynamics by shifting their processes, their teams, and structures. There are several ways that you can engage in the space and several ways in which your investment may not need to be more than just advocating for gender equality, and then you take it from there. Now, having said all of this, I must highlight that having good intentions doesn't mean that this will always be an easy path to travel. Capital flowing into gender lens investment is increasing. There is a clear need for it, and there are clearly opportunities as well. However, there are some constraints to be aware of. The first thing is that benchmark data around returns and impact specific to gender lens investing has not matured to the degree of granularity and comparability that mainstream investments may provide. So going into this space, you must be aware and be prepared to accept that you'll not be able to get the figures in the Excel spreadsheets that you may be used to seeing from other investments. However, this is something that the Global Impact Investing Network and other partners are building right now through the Navigating Impact project. And we are making great strides in this space, so it's just a matter of time. The second thing, and related to this, is that data collection also involves collecting or involving the investees or the enterprises in data in reporting and collection of data. And many of these enterprises don't have the capacity or the resources to dedicate to gender impact assessment, measurement, and reporting. So this is something to consider in your investment, that perhaps some of the resource can go into building that capacity, helping these organizations to integrate gender reporting into their existing protocols. The third thing is that we need more role models of women in leadership running successful businesses that can inspire others, that can inspire investors, that can build the space and show how effective an investment can be here. We have a few, but a lot of women are too shy to come forward. Having said all this, in a space that is growing as quickly as this, I think what is primary is to be able to build trust between an investor and an investee. And this, at a time when you can't travel or meet face-to-face, is challenging. A lot of the investors within the Avpn network and whom we have spoken to share the sentiment that the enterprises that they support are doing really good work, but they are operating in difficult situations. And in order to tide them through the path, this time that we're all facing, and ensure that the teams remain high performing, they're engaged in a number of conversations with the leaders, with the organizations, be it on Zoom or WhatsApp call for now, to ensure that they continue to share values, the same values, and share the same vision for the future. And I think that this is paramount in a space like this and in the context in which we currently operate. So this is the broad context of gender lens investing that we see in Asia. the constraints, the challenges, and the imperative. Let me now talk a little bit about what we see within the AVPN network and how our members are engaging in the space. Similar to the global context and the regional context, 67% of members in AVPN have indicated a commitment to women and girls as their beneficiaries or to gender equality as one of their primary impact areas. 2 out of 3 of these members are still at very early stages of building that practice. So although about 20% have already applied a gender lens when conducting impact measurement, only 14% apply the gender lens at the early stage of investment structuring and project design. What is interesting to us is that our members typically converge at various intersections of gender with other issues, for example, gender in health, gender in education, gender in economic empowerment and livelihoods. And indeed, women and girls play big roles in all of these areas. Let me now move to some of the innovative mechanisms that we have seen within the network. The first one, some of you may already be familiar with. This is called Biduk. Biduk was launched by Athena Global in March 2019 and has a number of partners in the region, and in Indonesia in particular, where Biduk serves as a vehicle to reduce the credit gap for women-led small and growing businesses. So what it does is offer flexible, commercially priced debt products for women entrepreneurs. And at this time, this is really helpful because several businesses have had to reassess their strategy, pivot their models, and explore alternatives in light of the changing market dynamics and opportunities with the pandemic. So giving them the space to do that with these debt products allows them to run better businesses and minimize the barriers to accessing capital from the formal financial sector once they are ready. What we know so far is that the loan sizes range from about 15,000 USD to 75,000 USD. Another approach that is pretty interesting is the Yellow Dog Empowers Fund, which is in South Korea. And this is a $5 million fund, which focuses on investing in women-owned and women-led businesses in South Korea. But it is doing so well that it is expanding to Southeast Asia in scope and will start to include companies providing products and solutions that could improve the lives of women in the next round. The third innovation, or something that is becoming popular as a product, is gender-linked impact bonds. Recently, there have been a growth in the number of gender-linked impact bonds because these target underserved women and girls in Asia and contribute to building back better through a portfolio of women-focused enterprises. IIX in December last year successfully priced the third bond in the Women's Livelihood Bond series. And WLB3 is part of a 150 million series, which aims to create sustainable livelihoods for over 3 million women across developing countries. ADB, the Asian Development Bank, has also been in the business of gender bonds since 2017 to help increase women's presence in society, promote gender equality and women's empowerment. And as of the end of last year, about October 2020, ADB had issued about 305 million in gender bonds. So within the ecosystem, there are funds, there are bonds, and there are also a number of collaborations and partnerships. And partnerships are fundamental in this space in order to achieve the large-scale impact that we are all intending to achieve in gender equality. One of these partnerships is partnership between Moonshot Ventures and YCAP Ventures, which partnered to launch the Indonesia Women Empowerment Fund sometime last year. Now, why this is an interesting fund is really because the fund goes beyond just sustainable livelihoods and looks to address solutions that cut across any number of sectors, including education, healthcare, financial services, or others, because it sees that women are affected in so many different ways and many of them are overlapping. So, having said all that, I think that what we have to do next is to be able to find the right partners, find the people to learn from, find examples of what we ourselves can do as investors so that we can then leapfrog the due diligence process and launch our own investment strategies. To this vein, I wanted to introduce you to the gender platform on the Avpn website, which shows some of these intersections and can connect members and other stakeholders with complementary skills. Maybe you're looking for grant collaboration, or you're looking for co-investors or intermediaries to scale your impact, provide an opportunity to learn best practice from leading practitioners, and perhaps just raise awareness around the issues that you are supporting. And that is my last slide. So I'll turn you back to Komal. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Rosh, for your presentation. It's wonderful to see how the growing GLI landscape, but we also know a lot more capital needs to be mobilized to reach gender equality and gender equity. We're just launching a quick poll. So if you could please scroll down to all 3 questions before submitting. While you all fill out the polls, I have the honor of introducing our esteemed speakers for this session. We will be joined by Shinta Dhanuwardoyo, a tech industry veteran and trailblazer who founded booboo.com, Durrie Hassan, founder of Visible Mission Ventures, the sustainable finance arm of his family office, and Katy Yung, MD at Sustainable Finance Initiative, a Hong Kong-based platform advising and supporting family offices and investors on their sustainable and impact journey. Before I pass the mic on to our speakers, let's see the results of the poll. Jen, if you could please publish the poll. So as we can see, there is clearly early level awareness, but there's 58% of the audience that's interested in this space. Again, 46% of you are interested in women-led and owned businesses. So the move is in the right direction. And we also know that in the investment process, many of our audience today have invested with grants, and they're also interested in making capital allocations, which is again a very positive trend. With that, I would like to invite our panelists. We want to hear about their personal journeys and their challenges and what they've experienced. So if I could ask all the speakers to turn on their cameras. Also, if you have any questions for the speakers, please put them in the Q&A pod, and we'll try and get these questions answered during the course of today's session. Can I ask our first speaker, Durrie Hassan, to introduce himself and tell us what attracted him to gender lens investing?
Sure, thank you, Komal. So as you mentioned, I run Visible Mission Ventures, which is the impact investment arm. I'm currently based in Manila, and it's really a sort of direct investment portfolio where we try to focus on impact first investments. And before I started, I did a lot of research on what is impact investing, trying to understand all the metrics and all the jargon. And GLI obviously was a big part of that. And the realization was that it is a tool that you really apply to all the investments, whether they're existing or the future investments you're going to make. And so understanding that, we decided that we would look at investing directly into women-led companies. And so the first investment we ever made was in a women-led social enterprise. And right now our portfolio has 40% women-led enterprises. So really just going from that journey of trying to understand how do you make impactful investments, how do you understand the process, how do you manage impact, that just fit in naturally with putting a gender lens on the investing.
Over to you, Katy.
Thank you, Komal. So a bit about myself. So I am based in Hong Kong, and we are a community of family offices that are looking at different topics across impact. And when it comes to the topic of gender lens, I suppose personally, being female and a lot of both on the issue side and on the opportunity, understanding there's a gap in consumer markets and access to finance is very intuitive to me. I think what is new is as we add on an investor lens to this, what I realized is even in some of the small number of personal venture investments that I've made, actually they were gender lens, but I didn't realize they were gender lens. So which made me realize that gender lens, as it was presented today, is really an overarching, almost like a lens and an overlay, like people, when they care about climate, it's that type of approach. Whereas historically, I think where I find myself thinking is a specific product or subsegment. So this kind of fundamental concept switch is what is happening, I think, for me personally, but probably also with some of the impact investors and the communities that are now starting to connect the dots in terms of tying the lens to issues and sectors, and also across the capital spectrum. So I think we are in the early days of beginning to explore this topic and finding a number of pretty interesting and compelling fund strategies in this space as well.
Over to you, Shinta. Please tell us about your personal journey and what attracted you to the GLI space.
Thank you, Komal. Maybe a bit about myself. I'm based in Indonesia. I'm actually been in the tech industry for 25 years. I was a venture capitalist at one time as well. I started one of the early venture capital here in Indonesia called Nusantara Ventures. But then nowadays I'm more like an angel investor, and I mentor a number of startups here in Indonesia. And we set up a couple of platforms that help startups to actually connect with investors as well. So maybe I don't really have an exact strategy in doing gender lens investment, but what happened is, because I'm a woman and I feel that I need to deconstruct the image of tech industry being like the boys club. So so the past years I've been also like looking at different tech companies who are women-led, even though I may not like actively like investing in a lot of them, but I do mentor a couple of them. And also we started an incubation program. Soon it's going to be like in July, we're going to start an incubation program just for women. It's called Super Girls in Tech. So the idea is actually to create an incubation program for seniors, university students that are female, and we want them to actually be able to build tech-based solution based on 4 pillars, which is financial inclusion, education, health, and also career opportunity. So those are the type of things that we want to help to empower women here in Indonesia, because we see that women currently make up about 38% of the country's labor force, but I think they only contribute like 29% to the GDP. So I think we still be able to maximize that. So that's one of the things that we want to also push more women to go into technology, because we know that using technology, we can actually help, to grow company faster. And especially we're in Indonesia, we have 17,000 islands. And, if you're not into tech, then, you're probably not gonna go too far, because, that's just spread out country. So definitely we're more like pushing women to go into tech nowadays. Yes, thank you.
That's a good segue, Shinta, to go to Durrie. One of the things you mentioned is about this boys' club of investing. Durrie, how do we encourage equality of voices in this space so that it's not just women advocating for GLI, it's everyone advocating for GLI?
Sure. I think there has to be an agreement on the definition, a very clear understanding, and the examples of GLI. For a lot of investors I meet, they generally think that, oh, it's going to be an exclusion, or you're limiting the type of investments you're making. And then you kind of have to correct them that no, it's not the case. The lens is the lens. You're applying it to all your investments. You're trying to become a smarter investor by getting as much information as possible about what you're investing in, the gender lens and other lenses too. And so I think we saw this similarly with, I think, impact investing and ESG. There was a point in time when fund managers or other investors weren't aware of what these terms meant, but now everyone sort of knows what it is, and you have impact washing problems, greenwashing problems. So the same thing has to happen with GLI, where everyone has a shared understanding, the shared definition, and then you can feel comfortable talking about, I know what it is, and I do it in so-and-so portfolios. So I think that's really the goal, to have equality in articulating experiences about GLI.
Thank you. Katy, you deal with a lot of investors and you run investor sessions as well. What are the usual areas of resistance you're facing from investors when it comes to GLI?
I think Durrie hit the nail on the head in terms of the analogies. And I think based on our recent run sessions and the temperature check, first is probably getting up to speed on the right framing and the concepts, which I caught myself sort of needing to refresh, which is it is a lens and not a specific angle, and it doesn't really completely narrow down your investor opportunity set because you're using GLI. So I think that's a major one actually to get through. And then the second piece is, if it's about being a smarter investor, what are the products out there? And so I think that's also what we found is our groups tend to be interested in more Asian-based investment opportunities closer to home ground. And probably I would say like 5 to 10 years ago on this particular topic, there were less products available. So a lot of the GLI narrative and opportunities probably originated or started more from outside of Asia, but that has rapidly changed in the past, I say 2 to 5 years. So I think the next level of challenge is finding the sweet spot of opportunities that match the GLI lens, whether it's venture investing, whether it's debt, whether it's direct investments. So I think we're just at the beginning of that conversation. And to overcome them, it's probably what we always advocate is learning by doing. So start with one investment and go from there.
Shinta, what's the landscape like in Indonesia? Are you seeing more capital being mobilized for gender lens investing?
Yes, definitely. I've seen more and more family offices. They're allocating certain fund for just GLI, and then there's a couple of venture capitals who are doing the same thing. And I think the reason for that is because I think Indonesia also started to have a more mature ecosystem, and then we know, like, it's been proven by research that women-led businesses are doing well. So now a lot more funding are being focused on the GLI, and there's a lot of news stories coming to Indonesia because, like, today we just announced the merger of Tokopedia, which is one of the biggest e-commerce in Indonesia, and also together with Gojek. So that's also going to create more hype. And then people are always like, I know in all this big we call it either big high-tech company, they're also like, they have like focus inside their company to actually help and empower more women-led businesses. So like even Gojek, I know they created like a fund also, I think, to actually push women to start their own business. And then Tokopedia has always been pushing also a lot of the business that are led by women, and they give like more like programs in terms of workshops and trainings for women. So those are the reason why also a lot of the funds are also looking at the women-led companies.
Do you feel that you need big players like Tokopedia and Gojek to take action for this landscape to grow?
It could be part of it, because it's not only them, because I know like Grab does the same thing, and I know most of the unicorns are doing it. So hopefully this is going to create more more gender lens investment towards more women-led business. I think one of the key is actually to really find those women-led businesses. How do we find the right one? How do we find the great one? So those are like the challenges we need to look at the moment, because not many actually here in Indonesia that are investable. So we're trying it also in our platform. We have startupindonesia.co, which is a platform that we created a year ago. We want to be able to look at who are the investable company in Indonesia. And we try also to look at the women-led businesses also.
Katy, do you think gender will now become the key metric when you're doing your due diligence and surfacing up opportunities from now? Will there be sort of a deliberate approach now that you have been acquainted with GLI in how you put that forward to your investor groups?
I think it's a process, quite frankly. Part of it is probably the challenge around, we're also reliant on the data available, or whether the companies or the fund managers equally share that sort of framework. And so I think it would be increasingly having more of those conversations around not just ESG and impact broadly and along specific thematics, but also bringing in the gender conversation that is relevant to that specific opportunity. But I think it would be a gradual process. And also there's also the challenge of labeling, which I see there's a question in the Q&A about, is it even helpful to sometimes use these frames and all that? So it would take some time. So for us, I think it would be a pragmatic approach of how we now get information from entrepreneurs and funds around this.
Before we turn to the questions in the Q&A, I have one question for Durrie. Now, you've already been investing 40% of your portfolio with a gender lens. What have you seen as outcomes? What has been the examples and the evidence that you've seen for this? And there's constant reference to this hidden alpha when it comes to GLI. Have you experienced that as well?
Yeah, I mean, the way I would measure it is, for a lot of the investments, I was a very early investor, and I usually take a board seat or a board observer seat. And these companies have managed to raise, succeeding rounds from other investors who, either believe in their impact mission or they themselves have a gender lens. We're seeing VC funds come in and all that. I haven't exited from the companies yet, obviously, but for me, the proof that here they are, progressing through the rounds of funding, getting more investors on board who believe in the mission, believing in the team. I should note that for all three, for the three companies that I have invested in as women founders, and I would say 75% of the management team are all women as well. And I think that's, for a lot of people, I think from my generation, it doesn't really pop up in our heads that, oh, this is an important thing that we need to emphasize. But I realize that we take all that for granted. We do know that you need to make responsible investments. We do know that the climate crisis is real. And we do need to bring an emphasis that gender inequality is still prevalent. And so we should highlight that this is why we're doing GLI. And so I'm trying to remind myself that I need to highlight these things more. So that's my piece.
Oh, that's really useful, because I mean, everything and anything anyone can do to further this cause of gender lens investing is important. I'm going to turn to the questions that have come through the chat. And the first one is clearly one that Katy mentioned. For respective speakers, talking about promoting GLI, do you use the jargon women-led? Women, is it necessary? There are a lot of gender supporters think that we should start to minimalize women label for women CEO, women founders, start to use CEO founders only. In that way, promoting gender equality would be much stronger. Do you agree? Could I take that to Shinta first?
Okay. For me, from the beginning, because I myself got into tech in super early 1996, and I came in when I'm kind of gender blind, because I didn't know like tech is like a boys club. When I got in, it's because I fell in love. So for me, I do not really want to label like this is a women-led, but it's just like, that's how it is right now. And for me, if it's much better, we can just say CEO or business led by whoever, it'll be great. But the reality is sometimes when we talk about GLI, we do talk that this is a business that is led by women, and we still use that. But hopefully later on, it's something that we don't really need to use. But because personally, I'm all about, because I myself in the beginning don't even realize that there's this gender parity thing. So I would love to see that's happening later on. But if you want to say about the reality right now, I think we want to highlight like what Durrie is saying. When we highlight, then we might have to say that word that it's a women-led business. But hopefully this is something that we don't have to say later on in the process.
What are your thoughts on it, Katy?
I'm very torn, to be honest. I think it's a little bit like Impact in the earlier days, where there would be companies that frankly just want to shy away from branding themselves as impact companies, because that immediately pigeonholes themselves for investors to say, then it's a social enterprise or it's concessionary return. So all those assumptions. So same goes with, I think, probably to some mainstream investors who are new to GLI or gender lens, that might quickly cast them to a certain area which they don't want to. So I think, but at the same time, I think the reason to do this is because of all the systemic issues that we've highlighted, that women founders are getting underfunded, VC led by women are getting underfunded, certain demographic of female consumers are not getting. So you've got to kind of put some light around it and naming it. So I don't have a straight answer of yes or no. And the hope is that over time, everyone's gonna agree that it should be part of the language and lingo. And it doesn't matter what you call it. It's more like, I think, changing mindsets at the end of the day, and which is gonna get you there. So it also depends on the conversation you're having with particular investors or stakeholders. If you kind of know that they're still skeptical, then maybe kind of don't overdo it yet, but try to convince them using other parameters like performance and new markets. But essentially, we're trying to promote the same things. I hope I'm making sense.
Durrie, do you agree with Katy that you actually need to remove necessarily that label to point to other metrics such that you sort of elicit that level of investment and that level of interest?
Partially. I agree more with what Shinta said. And to my earlier point, I think, right now on this webinar, this is a relatively academic meta discussion on GLI. I think the work and the time frame hasn't been done yet for everyone, investors, to be able to just say this is a tech company instead of prefacing this is women-led or women-founded. I think different countries are moving at different speeds with their acceptance of GLI, different investors also the same. And so up until we finally get to that point where we know for sure that gender equality has really been achieved, then I think we should still preface just to bring that topic to the front of people's minds so that we can talk about it. Oh, why did you start with women-led? Because, there's gender inequality and you want to support these companies. So that's my position.
We'd like to go to a poll now before we turn to the other questions in the Q&A. We're going to be hosting an investor circle on the 25th of May. So we're trying to identify individuals who would be interested in joining this investor circle. If you state that you're an accredited investor or you're interested in the GLI session on the 25th of May, please submit the poll. I won't be reading out the response. Please close it once it's finished. This particular question I would like to turn to is for Shinta. Would you like to share the key bottlenecks for women's participation in IT businesses in Indonesia? What does not work?
I think it's more like women tend to shy away from technology. It's not because they're not capable. I know because like I hired engineers or developers who are women. To tell you the truth, their work is more impeccable, like more like clear, but not many women are interested to go into technology. That's the problem. So the idea is to create more role model to show who is doing well in the tech space, who are women. And so that's more on the bottleneck rather than like, because they're not able to do it. It's more like not many women are interested to go into technology. And another thing is sometimes they kind of like question themselves, like, are they able to do this instead of just do it? So it's more like, for me, it's more like, how do I call it? Like, it's more on themselves rather than because they're not able to do it. So it's just like I need to push them, and we need to actually encourage them and show them more role models, and then they'll go, oh, okay, if she can do it, then actually we can also do it. So it's more like that. The bottleneck is not because they're not able to do it. It's more like on themselves. Like their belief on themselves is more of the problem, the way I see it.
There's always an imposter syndrome when it comes to women. And definitely the work you're doing with respect to tech and furthering, women, girls and seniors, I guess college students joining the coding camps should definitely help in that.
Hopefully, yeah, that's the idea, is actually to start them earlier before they go to the workforce, so they can decide whether they want to go build their own company or join a company, but at least they have a some background on in technology. That's the idea actually on the incubation program.
I have a question here for Rosh. When compared across different regions of the world, are there any characteristics that are specific to GLI in Asia?
Actually, that's a really interesting question. I think that there are regional cultural preferences that affect the way you look at gender. Perhaps Europe versus West Africa, the MENA region, and Asia. And that would contribute to what Katy and Durrie and Shinta have been talking about, right? When do women come to the table? When do you see the need to articulate this thing called a gender lens? And when do you take it for granted that it is something that we don't need to call out because everybody is seen as equal in terms of opportunity and in terms of access? So here in Asia, being as diverse as it is, it's very difficult to say that there is one Asian perspective. In developed parts of Asia, there may be pockets of inequality and discrimination, so to speak, that are not prevalent in even developing parts of Asia. So I think it's kind of hard to generalize for Asia, but definitely culture plays a big role in this. That stereotypes that we have developed over generations and generations about the woman's role and the woman's place in society. Things around safety for women also plays a role. Things around access for women at the workplace, gender-based violence, things around workplace harassment. All of these considerations come into play, and I think that there are similarities across the world, and then also you can find in Asia cultural differences. Sorry, that's not a very good answer. I think it's because it's gender as a frame is such a big frame. I mean, 51% of the world is female. So it's very hard to say that in Asia the gender issue is how different it is from other parts of the world. I think in every country you'll have similarities and differences.
I think actually leading on from that, Rosh, there's actually a question that's come in. In India and Sri Lanka, for many women-led businesses in the non-tech and service industry, they don't know about the possibility of getting investors. It's rather government-led assistance that they hope to receive. How do these businesses get the attention of fund houses and gender lens investors? Durrie, over to you for that one.
So you're talking about sort of maybe rural companies, non-tech companies.
Yeah. Service companies.
For service companies, yeah. Well, for every type of company, there'll be a type of investor who's willing to either invest at the ticket size, be it lower than what they normally would. With venture philanthropy or impact investment, you're more likely to see that foundations probably go into that space. I think, you know, in the sector, well, for GLI itself, you need institutions like ADB and IFC to issue gender bonds, but you also need a lot of educators, you know, people who sort of, the organizations that will collate and collect people to talk about such things like in Avpn. And so really it's a matter of, I think, outreach and making sure that they know there are all these resources that will connect them to the people or the organizations they need to talk to. And yeah, I think that's really the only way, because you know, I don't know any investors in Sri Lanka, say, but I'm sure that through a larger network, I would find one, and that's sort of how you would take the conversation to the next steps.
Thank you for the AVPN plug. Appreciate that. Over to you, Shinta. How do we get investors to look at, I guess, businesses that don't necessarily get the attention of the fund houses?
Well, I'm gonna plug my company here. So we started this platform called startupindonesia.co, which is a platform that helps connects startups in Indonesia with investors, mentors, angel investors. And the idea is, when we started this, we want to give equal access to everyone in Indonesia, because like I was saying in the beginning, that we have 17,000 islands in Indonesia. And most of the startups that are being funded are mostly in Jakarta, which is the capital city of Indonesia. And we don't want that, because I know in Surabaya, in Bandung, there are a lot more startups who are actually ready to be invested. So, you know, we're hoping also like people, you know, people also look at AVPN, of course, you know, those are the type of platform that people can actually check on the different startups that are not probably highlighted by medias, or, you know, they don't have network. So we want to create that accessibility for everybody. Even they don't have network, they can actually meet the venture capital. So we're working with 40 venture capitals right now, not just in Indonesia, but also outside of Indonesia. And they're all are very interested, of course, in companies in Indonesia, because, you know, we've been making so much noises as well. So that's one of the way to actually look at which company to invest, because we create an investability point as well. So we create point system, like if this company is investable, it's 1 to 5, and the biggest one is 5 points. So those are the things that we're doing actually in startupindonesia.co. And I'm sure one way to do it is actually, you know, talk to companies, the companies to platform like AVPN. And I know a number of organizations who are actually also pushing a number of women-led businesses, and they're also actively trying to connect these businesses to all the venture capitals or the investors.
Thank you. Rosh, this one's for you. We're seeing a lot of increased efforts into GLI. Who do you think are the players, actors that are driving this trend, and what is their role? And also I know a lot of people here have referred to AVPN. What can we do as an organization to further this?
So, I mean, this is a multi-stakeholder effort. So everybody is involved and everybody is responsible, from the government downwards. I think that everybody has a role to play. So what we need are strong policies to promote the inclusion of women at the workplace, to incentivize businesses and companies to have women represented at all levels of leadership. We need hiring managers to be conscious of selecting the best candidate for the job, not perhaps the most well-known candidate, that can sometimes in some businesses be a boys club, things like that have to be kind of put into organizational policies so that there is a fair and equal process for recruitment and promotion. Then further down the line, I spoke about the role of the investor. And the investor providing the incentives and sort of prodding gently through all the avenues that the investors have: advocacy, financial commitment, networks, to ensure that gender is prioritized. I think what we have seen and what everyone has alluded to is that often people are just not conscious. There is this unconsciousness about gender disparities. And if we all bring that consciousness to the table, I think that we can create that wave of change that we would like to see in gender lens investing.
I'm going to go to our final question for today. We want to hear from all three of you, all four of you. What are the activities or solutions that you've adopted to help women overcome self-excluding beliefs that hold them back? Durrie, we begin with you first.
I mean, the way I approach it is really not dissimilar to how I would advise anyone who needs to go through that. With a lot of the women founders and their teams, you're running into the same problems that say men face, same challenges, and the advice really, and I always have to really be aware of I think my place and how I give the advice. I try to maintain it to be objective. I cannot speak to the challenges, or even understanding the challenges that a woman will face in the boardroom, whether you're fundraising and all that. I'm aware that it exists, but it's far beyond me to even be able to empathize. I know that it is a huge problem, and so luckily on all the other boards I sit on, there are other women there, and I just focus on the objective, to the best of my ability, objective advice related to if it's conflict management, then conflict management. But I've not given that type of advice to any woman before.
Katy, women tend to be self-effacing. What guidance, what advice, what promotion would you do?
I think normally, to Durrie's point, I don't assume and step in as a know-it-all. But what I usually do is probably either put them in touch with people that are similar to them or really truly understand their situation to give advice, or kind of refer them to a close-knit community that is like-minded, so they feel safe to share those challenges and kind of figure out how to navigate it. And sometimes it's just about having a sounding board that they feel completely are empathetic and understand where they're coming from. So I've seen these approaches even adopted by kind of VC funds that are woman-led or have a GLI approach, that they would do very simple things like when they reach out and vet the woman-led entrepreneurs and founders, the office hours would be, very flexible, because understanding these could be mothers or working from home. And very small things down to also how the diligence questions that you ask, is there gender bias? Is it gender neutral? Not asking questions around, who are the other LPs on your board, because that might trigger gender bias as well. So being quite sensitive to these aspects. So I'm still learning along the way, but overall it's kind of being sensitive to that and connecting them to groups or people that can provide that safe space to figure it out.
And Shinta, the final piece of wisdom from you to women entrepreneurs.
I think I always tell the women that we're all the same, men and women, we're all the same. So I like what Katy was saying. Actually, I do that as well. So when I cannot answer myself, what I would do is I would refer it to my friend, who are also women most of the time, and they probably have the same type of business, or try to get them to the right people to talk to, because I may not be the answer to all their questions. I may not be able to answer them as well. But yeah, because women tend to be more open to other women. That's how I see it. So that's why most of the time, if these women have certain questions or they have certain doubts, I would ask them, like, would you want to talk to this friend of mine, because she's doing the same business, and probably she can answer better. So I try to just like show them probably more role models, more successful female entrepreneurs, and tell them that the success stories and all that, so they're more encouraged to do what they're doing. More on that part.
I agree. Role models and having others to turn to definitely helps to further this cause. We've come to the end of our session. I would like to thank our speakers. Thank you so much for sharing and candidly letting us know your experience and what you're doing to further the cause of gender lens investing. We have an upcoming session tomorrow with a stellar lineup of all female speakers from BlackRock, Ayala Corporation, SGX, and Dentons, and that's at 4 o'clock tomorrow, and it's on the ESG. The topic is ESG, so please do sign up for that. Plus, we will be hosting with SFI the Investor Circle on the 25th. So if you've committed to that, look forward to seeing you then. Please also, if there is any interest and you forgot to enter it into the poll, please write to jenny.kim@avpn.asia. And with that, I want to thank everyone for attending, and thank you to the wonderful speakers today for sharing your insights. I wish everyone the best. Please stay safe and have the wonderful rest of your day. Thank you.